Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk and give you a quick status update. Obviously, there are a lot of things we can talk about, but basically, I want to review the current status of board certification. Obviously, the first step is the qualifying exam, formerly known as the written exam, but is really computer-based. And there are three portions of that. There's the medical physics for radiation oncology, the radiobiology or radiation and cancer biology, and then clinical radiation oncology. Then we have the certifying exam, otherwise known as the oral exam, which is now remote for all examinees. And then once you have passed that, there is no longer lifetime certification. There's what we call continuing certification, or what was previously called maintenance of certification. And one of the big pushes for us in the ABR is this era of transparency with really open communication and cooperation. And hopefully those in the audience that have worked with us over the last year and a half or 2 years have really felt that. We've made some changes in response to most of the groups in terms of trying to really make sure that we're fulfilling our goals. In order to be eligible for the qualifying exam, which is the oral exam, again, you have to pass both the physics and radiobiology exam. Everyone can take it after completing 32 months of residency training. However, if the program directors wish, they can write a letter asking for the eligibility to take physics and radiobiology after only 24 months. It's variable because programs are variable in terms of their programs themselves in the training. Clinical radiation oncology can be taken anytime after completion of 44 months of residency. For the certifying or oral exam, you must have passed all three of those, and minimum, you can take it in the calendar year following completion of residency. All additional documentation requirements must also be met. And the certification requirements, of course, completing an ACGME or RCPSC accredited radiation oncology program, 4 years of approved training in radiation oncology, and it has to be accredited in a department that is approved by the RRC or the ACGME or Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons for Canada. You have to have the 36 months of clinical radiation oncology with exposure to pathology and medical oncology, and no more than 6 months can be in an elective rotation outside the parent institution as defined in the RRC. For board eligibility, those currently in training, it begins at the completion of the ACGME or RCPSC accredited training, and it extends for 6 years. For candidates seeking initial certification from an alternate pathway, the completion of training is then defined as the 4-year period outlined in the individual sponsoring program agreement. And there's a time limit for completing residency training now effective July 1st, 2026, where you have to complete your residency within 8 years of the start date of residency. So we have some updates that have changed a little bit for those who have not heard yet in the publications that we have put forward. Physics, we are really trying to make sure that it's focusing on the fundamental physics knowledge that is essential to a radiation oncologist. We're trying to really focus on clinically relevant physics whenever possible. Of course, you still have to have the basics. We're trying to avoid non-radiation oncology related physics when possible. And the same really for radiobiology. We want fundamental radiobiology knowledge, which is essential. You have to know some of the basics, but we want to really focus on what's clinically relevant for a radiation oncologist. And we're trying to focus less on mechanisms and molecular details that don't impact us in the clinic. This has been a real push for me, as I'm sure most of us remember getting out of the exam saying, why do we possibly need to know that? The problem is we do need to know a lot of this stuff as a framework for further learning. So this is not a get out of jail free, as they say. It's really just trying to define so that programs and residents know what to study. And if it really is essential to radiation oncology and essential to learning further aspects of the field, then you need to know it. And for clinical radiation oncology, likewise, there's a huge volume shift, and we are now changing the hematology category to also include benign diseases, and it is an ACGME required topic, and of course, it is an area of emphasis for Astro. So that will be showing up on the exam really coming up next year. There's going to be less reliance on memorization of hard clinical trial data. That doesn't mean you don't need to know the clinical trial data, but the point is now going to be, why do you need to know the data instead of memorizing specific percentages unless they're really paradigm shifting or practice changing trials that you really would need to know the percentages if you were going to talk to a patient or present in tumor board. We've also adjusted the test assembly and ANGOF, which is the behind the scenes creation of the exam and scoring of the exam, to make it more representative of the field in general. So we have more private practice, academic, community physicians, program directors, really into all of the exams. All of these changes are essentially designed to ensure that the radiation oncology program directors and residents are focusing on what we consider high yield information that is truly clinically relevant, regardless of whatever chosen practice setting you have. The certifying exam is the oral exam, and we're now on version 2. It's remote for all examinees, so nobody has to fly to Louisville or Tucson. This year it was partially remote for the examiners, and we've really had relatively minimal IT issues. One thing I don't know that if everyone understands is, but this process was entirely built in-house by the ABR, and really is the model by which all other boards have failed to attain. Many of them are going back to in-person exams because their IT experiments were not successful. And it's always undergoing continued development. Every year it gets better and better. As you probably all know, the leave policy has been updated as of the 21-22 academic year. I don't want to belabor this, but essentially you have an average of 8 weeks off per year. Anything beyond that in the program, it can certainly and should ask you to extend under the authority of the program director. Eligibility for initial certification requires the program director to attest to successful completion of your residency. Research time, conferences, mandatory off hours, overtime, those are all considered part of residency. And then, of course, we have continuing certification. We did get rid of the SAM CMEs because the online longitudinal assessment, again, another in-house ABR-built IT success story, are these 2 questions we get for walking around knowledge. Now, that's an option. You can also opt not to do that and take the continuing certification exam. In my estimation, the OLA is far easier, and if anyone had their choice, I think they would agree. Not only is it easier, but it's also educational because you learn when you get something wrong, and it's great to be able to continue to have that education while you're out in practice. And then, of course, the part 4 is now all self-reported. Please maintain your records so that if you do get audited, you can provide records of your medical practice improvement. However, that is now including things like chart rounds, tumor boards, things like that. So I know that was a very quick overview, but I wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware of the changes that we had, and I'd love to take any questions if anyone has any.